Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, December 5th, 2016 City Council meeting. Please silence your cell phones. And Mr. Swayzer will be leading us in the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we are blessed to be into the season of Thanksgiving, renewal, and rebirth. Help us to carry the spirit of the season into the new year and beyond. We ask that you give us the wisdom to recognize that we are one people, one race, all doing your will. We ask that you bless those who are serving overseas, who may be in harm's way, and who cannot be home with their loved ones. We ask that you watch over the first responders so that they may return home safely as well. And lastly, I pray that each and every one in our community, both near and far, find whatever it is that stirs the Christmas spirit within us, whether it is the lighting of the tree, the smell of pine, the smell of snickerdoodles baking, or even children's laughter. May each of you fulfill the joy of the season. Merry Christmas, and Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Terwilliger?
Here.
Mr. Swayzer?
Here.
Mr. Tremblay?
Here.
Mr. Kendall?
Here.
Mrs. Sneed?
Here.
Mr. Twist?
Here.
Mrs. Oda? Here. Mr. Heath?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
All members of council are present.
Thank you. Will you please read the summary of minutes from our November 21st, 2016 meeting?
Minutes of council, November 21, 2016. A public hearing was held on ordinance 053. Committee reports. Personnel Committee recommended legislation be prepared amending the wage scale for seasonal workers to reflect the starting hourly wage to comply with Ohio minimum wage. Safety and Health Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing a police mutual aid agreement. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing an agreement with Wolpert, Inc. for a traffic and parking study, and also recommended that legislation be prepared to approve a vacation of a 10-foot alley located off Cherry Street. Utilities Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing a contract with RA Consultants for the West Milton Regionalization Study Phase 2. Resolution number R50 2016, Police Mutual Aid Agreement, first reading and adopted. Resolution R51 2016, Agreement with RA Consultants for the Water Regionalization Study, first reading and adopted. Resolution R52 2016, Agreement with Wolpert for Downtown Parking and Traffic Study, first reading and adopted. Ordinance 048 2016 regarding medical marijuana was given fourth reading and failed adoption. Ordinance 053 2016 vacating an alley adjacent to the safety building was given second reading. Ordinance number 055 2016 vacating alley located off South Cherry Street was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance 056 2016 seasonal salary ordinance was given first reading and was adopted. Following comments, council adjourned 7:38 p.m.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or questions?
To accept the minutes. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion to accept the minutes by Mr. Swayzer, second by Mr. Heath. Please call the roll.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Terwilliger?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
All right, thank you. Tonight we have two committee reports. First is Finance, and that is my committee. This regards the 2017 budget approval, authorizing appropriation ordinance, authorizing agency funding. On November 28th, the Finance Committee and all members of Council met for the review of the 2017 budget. This budget reflects the mayor's and council's #1 priority of economic development. We note that a budget must be a working document, and we anticipate some reappropriations during the year. The work and cooperation of the mayor, city administration, and department heads is appreciated in developing the budget document. It is the recommendation of this committee that the 2017 budget of the City of Troy be approved by the preparation and adoption of the appropriation ordinance. The appropriation includes continuing to fund the Troy Development Council in the amount of $125,000. We recommend that legislation be prepared authorizing the 2017 funding to the Troy Development Council in the amount of $125,000. And the appropriation includes funding for the Troy Main Street, Inc., and the Troy Recreation Association, Inc. We recommend that legislation be prepared authorizing the following for 2017: Troy Main Street, Inc., $55,000, Troy Recreation Association, Inc., $29,000. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Swayzer, Mr. Tremblay, and myself as chairman. So are there any questions or comments regarding this committee report? Okay, our next report is Streets and Sidewalks, and Mr. Bobby Phillips, chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sort of.
Pro tem.
Pro tem. On November 28th, this committee met to consider the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission, to wit, a 20-foot alley adjacent to parts of in-lots 14, 15, 32, and 33, located between West Main Street and West Water Street, be vacated as it serves no public purpose for the city. The only adjacent property owner is Miami County. As the property owner did not petition for the alley to be vacated, the city followed the required process that included a 6-week advertising period and a public hearing. The recommendation of the Planning Commission is we support the recommendation of the Planning Commission and recommend that ordinance number 053-2016 be approved, vacating the 20-foot alley adjacent to parts of in-lots 14, 15, 32, and 33, running between West Main Street and West Water Street. And this is respectfully submitted Councilman Heath, Councilwoman Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any questions or comments on this committee report? Okay. Being none at this point in the meeting, we will open it up to citizen comments. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes, and we will have Mr. Kerber act as our timekeeper on this. So if anyone has any comments to make, please come forward to the podium and give your name and address. Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to the legislation. Mrs. Knight, will you please read Resolution R53, 2016?
Resolution number R53, 2016, resolution authorizing the Board of Recreation of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into a contract with the Troy Recreation Association, Inc. for recreation services. This provides funding to the Troy Rec in the amount of $29,000 for calendar year 2017. First reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding this legislation?
Move for suspension.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for suspension from Mr. Phillips with a second by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor by Mr. Swayzer for adoption and a second by Mr. Heath. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swayzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Okay, Mrs. Knight, will you please read Resolution R54, 2016?
Resolution R54, 2016, resolution approving funding to Troy Main Street, Inc. This provides for funding in the amount of $55,000 for calendar year 2017, first reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding this resolution?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Swazer and a second by Mrs. Oda. Will you please read the roll?
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for adoption by Mr. Swazer and a second by Mr. Twist. Will you please read the roll on this?
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Will you please read Resolution R56, 2016? 55, I'm sorry.
Resolution number R55, 2016. Resolution approving funding to the Troy Development Council for Economic Development for the City of Troy. Funding for 2017 in the amount of $125,000. First reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on this resolution?
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Tremblay and a second by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for adoption by Mr. Swazer and a second by Mr. Heath. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Now we move to ordinances, and Mrs. Knight, will you please read Ordinance O53, 2016?
Ordinance number 053, 2016, an ordinance vacating an improved public alley running between West Main Street and West Water Street in the city of Troy, Ohio. This has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. A public hearing was held. This is adjacent to the safety building, and this is the third reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding this?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for adoption by Mr. Phillips with a second by Mr. Swazer. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Knight, will you please read Ordinance O57, 2016?
Ordinance number 057, 2016, ordinance appropriating funds necessary for the various departments and offices of the city of Troy, Ohio for the year 2017. The appropriation ordinance is actually the adoption of the budget. This is the first reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding this legislation?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for suspension by Mr. Swazer and a second by Mrs. Sneed. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Twilliger.
Yes.
Mr. Swazer.
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yes.
Mr. Kendall.
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mrs. Oda.
Yes.
Mr. Heath.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for adoption from Mr. Phillips with a second by Mr. Swazer. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Swazer.
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yes.
Mr. Kendall.
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mrs. Oda.
Yes.
Mr. Heath.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. Now, Mrs. Knight, will you please read ordinance number 058, 2016?
Ordinance number 058, 2016, ordinance amending ordinance number 042, 2015, as amended by ordinance number 025, 2016, appropriating funds necessary for the various departments and offices of the City of Troy, Ohio for the year 2016. This is the year-end cleanup reappropriation ordinance, first reading.
Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding this ordinance?
I move for suspension.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for suspension from Mr. Tremblay with the second by Mr. Swazer. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Tremblay,
Yes.
Mr. Kendall,
Yes.
Mrs. Snead,
Yes.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Oda,
Yes.
Mr. Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger,
Yes.
Mr. Swazer.
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we get a motion for adoption by Mr. Swazer with a second by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the roll?
Mr. Kendall,
Yes.
Mrs. Snead,
Yes.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Oda,
Yes.
Mr. Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger,
Yes.
Mr. Swazer,
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, will you please read ordinance 059, 2016?
Ordinance number 059, 2016, ordinance imposing moratorium for a period of an additional 180 days on the granting of any permit allowing retail dispensaries, cultivators, or processors of medical marijuana within the City of Troy, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. This is a second moratorium, another 180 days, first reading.
Okay, for clarification, this goes into effect after the current moratorium's over,
Yes.
right? Which I believe is sometime in January, so. Okay, are there any other questions or comments regarding the ordinance?
Move for suspension.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for suspension by Mr. Phillips with a second by Mr. Swazer. Mrs. Knight, please read the roll.
Mrs. Snead,
Yes.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Oda,
Yes.
Mr. Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger,
Yes.
Mr. Swazer,
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay,
Yes.
Mr. Kendall.
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion for adoption by Mr. Swazer with a second by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, would you please read the roll?
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Oda,
Yes.
Mr. Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Twilliger,
Yes.
Mr. Swazer,
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay,
Yes.
Mr. Kendall,
Yes.
Mrs. Snead.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Okay, this concludes the legislative part of our meeting. Mrs. Knight, is there any communications?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments?
Well, Mr. President Pro Tem, I do. In the spirit of the season, I do have a joy we talked about in our invocation today. It was shared by one of our distinguished citizens in this community over this past weekend. It deals with the best small cities. And there's a survey that was listed called Wallet Hub. We didn't participate in it. We didn't know anything about it until he handed the information to us. It was recently compiled to list America's best small cities of 2016, where they compared 1,268 cities that had a population between 25,000 and 100,000. Now remember, our population is, by the last census, is 25,058. So we are at the lowest end of that survey. They used 5 dimensions that they looked at in judging small cities such as ours: affordability, economic health, education, the quality of life, and the safety features that our communities provide. Then from that, they also added looking at housing cost, your unemployment rate, and the number of cultural museums and things that you offer to citizens. I'm happy to report there were only 7 Dayton regional cities that were listed, and we appeared as one of those cities, and we ranked second only to Beaver Creek. But I will add, one of the best things in the entire region is we ranked, of that 1,268, 394th in quality of life for community and for people to live in. The closest in our region in terms of quality of life, I think, was ranked 475th or something. So we did very well in this study that we didn't ask for. Somebody else looked into different small cities, and we come in second in the region, and obviously one of the better ones in the country that they looked at, and probably one of the smallest populations too. So just thought we're talking about spirit of Christmas and season of joy. I thought that would be good to share. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of administrative items. Number one, as of Saturday, the Dye Mill facility is closed. However, we'll still pick up tea bags. So anybody who still has some things they want to put out, they can do that in those bags. And they can get those here at City Hall or at the True Value. We do continue with leaf pickup. I think we're into the third round now. We understand there are piles that are still there, and we're getting to them, and we will continue to do that at least through a third round, and then we'll look and assess where we're at and whether or not the weather is cooperating, as well as the staff time, as the resources are there to continue on. And then finally, the 23rd and the 26th are holidays, and so the City Hall will be closed. However, trash and recycling will be on schedule. There will be no delays. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Law Director, Mr. Gerber.
I have nothing this evening. Mr. President Pro Tem, thank you.
City Auditor, Mr. John Frady.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. As I moved into the auditor's position this past January, Mr. Stickle warned me that the budget season would be the most time-consuming part of the year. He was correct. I want to thank Mr. Titterington, Mrs. Knight, and the department heads for putting together a very workable budget for this year, one that we can all live with, and I hope next year, I hope it's just as smooth as this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from City Council?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Phillips.
Thank you. I'd like to invite all members of council and on the audience to attend tomorrow's 4 p.m. Park Recreation Board and the Park Board of Commissioners. We're going to hear some exciting news going forward about Operation Recreation and a presentation of both of those committees at the same time. So I invite you all to attend tomorrow at 4 o'clock here in these chambers.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from council? Anyone from city staff? Anyone in the audience? If so, please come forward and state your name and address. Okay, seeing none, with no other business come before council, I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.